If a priest became unclean under the law, what weren't they allowed to do? This is the question that we seek to answer today as we continue our verse-by-verse study of the book of Leviticus on walking through the Bible.
The glory of his cross.
If you have a Bible with you, turn to Leviticus 22. We're going to be reading from verses 1 to 8. If you don't have a Bible, don't worry. Just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So, Leviticus 22, beginning at verse 1. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to Aaron and his sons, that they separate themselves from the holy things of the children of Israel, and that they do not profane my holy name by what they dedicate to me. I am the Lord. Say to them, whoever of all your descendants throughout your generations who goes near the holy things which the children of Israel dedicate to the Lord, while he has uncleanness upon him, that person shall be cut off from my presence. I am the Lord. Whatever man of the descendants of Aaron, who is a leper or who has discharge, shall not eat the holy offerings until he is clean. And whoever touches anything made unclean by a corpse, or a man who has an emission of semen, or whoever touches any creeping thing by which he would be made unclean, or any person by whom he would become unclean, whatever his uncleanness may be, the person who has touched any such thing shall be unclean until evening, and shall not eat the holy offerings unless he washes his body with water. And when the sun goes down, he shall be clean, and afterward he may eat the holy offerings, because it is his food. Whatever dies naturally or is torn by beasts, he shall not eat to defile himself with it. I am the Lord. Coming now to chapter 22, we arrive at the final chapter in section 3 of Leviticus that began all the way back in chapter 11. We've seen uncleanness and its removal in all sorts of ways among the people, while in chapter 21 we've seen regulations about uncleanness that affected the priests in general and then the high priest himself. Physical cleanliness under the law of Moses, which did not mean having bathed, but rather not having come in contact with something unclean, was important. This was a physical law with physical priests, a physical tabernacle, and physical sacrifices. God is a holy God and therefore could not be approached by someone who was unclean, which is why we see all these regulations not only outlining how someone was unclean under the law, but detailing how someone became clean again. All of these instructions that we've discussed thus far pertain to the people. We've seen the priests involved, yes, but it was the people who were the topic of conversation. What happened if the priests became unclean? Well, in short, they weren't to profane the holy things of the tabernacle by doing service to the Lord while they were unclean. If they were lepers, they were to follow the rules set out in chapters 13 and 14, and thus couldn't serve in the tabernacle or eat the holy offerings until they were declared clean by the priest and offered their sacrifices. They had a discharge. They were not to serve in the tabernacle or eat of the holy offerings until they had met the regulations found in chapter 15. If the priest had an emission of semen, covered in chapter 15, had touched a dead carcass, covered in chapter 11, touched a creeping thing that would have made him unclean, covered in chapter 11, or touched a person who would have made him unclean, covered in various chapters between chapters 11 through 20, they would be unclean until evening, and were not allowed to eat of the holy offerings or serve in the tabernacle until they had washed in water and the sun had gone down. After that, they could resume their duties and were able to eat of the holy offerings because, after all, the holy offerings were their food. They also weren't allowed to eat that which died naturally or was torn by beasts, for that too would make someone unclean according to chapter 17. What would happen if the priest disobeyed these commands? He would be cut off from the presence of the Lord, meaning that he would die. We need to look no further than God's treatment of Nadab and Abihu in chapter 10. Recall that they tried to offer strange fire before the Lord, fire that the Lord had not commanded to be offered. Instead of correcting Nadab and Abihu for their error, the Lord sent fire down and killed them both right on the spot. This might look rash to us, but remember, these were the priests, the ones who needed to be holy before God and offer the sacrifices of the people. They could not do so if they were in disobedience, so that is why God reacted the way he did, to hammer home in the minds of the priests to pay attention. They needed to follow God's laws. Becoming unclean under the law wasn't necessarily sinful. However, pretending as if someone was not unclean and then going into the tabernacle and profaning the sanctuary of God was. If something unclean came in contact with something that was clean, that item was now unclean and couldn't be used in service again unless it was made clean again. That's why the priests had to not be in service to God while they were unclean. It was not a punishment. It was a precaution so as not to profane the holy things of the tabernacle. If they followed these commands, they would live. Otherwise, they would die. We'll continue with this chapter, Lord willing, in the next episode. With that, our time is up for today. The Lord willing, I hope you'll join us for tomorrow's discussion of Leviticus 22, verses 9 to 16, as we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time. Thank you for watching today's episode. We hope that you found it edifying and ask that you not only subscribe to our channel and podcast, but that you like and share this episode among your friends so that the saving gospel of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.